So I want to start off by sharing a quick story because I think this story will help kind of set the tone for kind of the topic that I want to discuss. I grew up adventuring. I love adventures. I love the outdoors. And about 2 years ago, I started training for probably my most epic adventure to date. I wanted to kayak from Cuba to Florida. And I spent the better part of a year training, waking up at 3 in the morning and paddling until I needed to go to work in the morning, and on Saturdays would wake up at 3 and paddle until nightfall. Sometimes I would paddle through the night and into the next day to better understand what it felt like to paddle without food, without sleep, because this paddle was going to take 35 hours. And because of the current going through the Florida Strait, you can't stop or you can't rest because the current will push you into the Atlantic. So it was something that I was very excited about. My paddling partner and I had prepared. We felt ready to go. And when we were in Havana preparing to leave, we made our first critical error. We decided that we didn't want to have anything to do with our support boat. And we had 3 other teams that were doing this paddle with us, some other entrepreneur friends. But we decided that we were going to stay away from the support boat, that we didn't need their help. And when we started the paddle, it was beautiful. This beautiful turquoise blue water. There were dolphins and turtles. It was just this magical moment. And about 12 hours into the journey, everything changed. Nightfall happened, and pretty soon we started seeing lightning striking all around us. And a huge storm rolled in, and the captain of the support boat called out to everyone and asked everyone to get as close as possible to the support boat because he couldn't see us with the waves. We'd be behind waves, and he ended up calling us to get closer. And during the chaos of the storm, my paddling partner and I in our kayak got squeezed in between another kayak and the support boat. And a huge wave came, and it slammed our kayak against the side of the support boat. And instinctively, what we wanted to do and what we should have done is taken our hands and violently pushed away from the support boat to get ourselves some distance from it. But instead, because we'd agreed to not even touch the support boat no matter what, we did nothing. And the second wave came and slammed us up against the boat again. And this is when I heard the crushing of fiberglass. And I heard my paddling partner scream. And the support boat landed on top of our kayak and pushed us underneath the water. And so we spent the next 2 hours treading water, trying to get our kayak flipped back over, our damaged kayak, and tried to salvage it. But in the end, this kayak that weighed like 1,000 pounds, we couldn't move it. It was, even though we trained to flip our kayak back over, in this storm it was just getting thrown around and we couldn't move it. And it eventually broke in half and sank to the bottom of the ocean. And it was a really discouraging moment. We'd spent so much time preparing for this trip. We were fortunate that our support boat had an extra kayak, and we were able to get it into another kayak, and we were able to finish the rest of the journey. But I learned a really valuable lesson, and that is that it is easy to get distracted by things that really don't matter. Our primary objective was to cross the Florida Strait and to do it safely. And instead, we compromised that by setting a silly goal, a distraction. And in life, sometimes we have these great goals. We have goals of maybe changing the world, of making the world a better place. And sometimes as life goes on, we get distracted by things that really just don't matter. And it can be making more money. I've seen so many friends that have, they go to graduate school and pretty soon they feel like they have to pay back their loans, and pretty soon all they care about is making as much money as possible. And in the end, those things distract us from what's truly important. And so I just wanted to start with that to kind of set that framework. And I mentioned that I grew up loving adventure. My dad was an adventurer. This is my father. My family lived abroad when I grew up. I moved to the developing world when I was 4 years old. And it really ended up shaping me. My dad always had some adventure planned, whether it was making our own raft and floating down the Amazon River, fishing for piranha, or going and surviving on uninhabited islands with spears that we'd made ourselves. And so I grew up loving the outdoors. But I think maybe the most impactful experience that I had as a child was developing a deep sense of empathy for other people. One of my very first memories as a child, as a 4-year-old child, was seeing kids that were around my age, that were 4 or 5 years old, that were completely naked on the sides of the street. And you can't have that kind of experience as a child and not have it shape who you are. And so from the time I was little, I always knew that I had to do something to help others. And it was a goal that I'd had all the way throughout my childhood. When I went to college, I had this passion in my head that I needed to find a way to make a difference. And I started learning about something that was changing the world. And it was the opening of markets. It was capitalism. It was this idea that, that basically we could actually create wealth and spread that wealth across different populations. And so 200 years ago, in the year 1820, about 94% of the world's population lived in poverty. And if you fast forward to the time I was born in 1978, that had been cut in half. Only about half the world's population lived in extreme poverty. And then if you fast forward to last year, 2016, for the first time in human history, less than 10% of the world lived in extreme poverty. So we've made a tremendous impact. And this inspired me in college. I remember thinking, wow, this is something that's attainable. We can actually eradicate extreme poverty in our lifetimes if we do this, if we all work together. And so I just needed to figure out how to do that. And so I started looking for internships. I wanted to try to find a way that I could make an impact. And I found this really cool internship in Peru. And it was working for a nonprofit. It was an unpaid internship, but I got to do something that I was really passionate about. And I already knew Spanish because I'd grown up in that region of the world. And so I had this amazing experience. And when I was there, I went to a little city called Cusco. It's in the mountains of Peru. It's the longest continuously inhabited city in the Americas. And it's near Machu Picchu, the ruins that everyone knows about. And when I got to Cusco, the first thing I did was I went and got some food, and I sat down in the main plaza, this beautiful plaza called the Plaza de Armas. And I didn't want to eat in the restaurant. I wanted to sit on a bench, and I wanted to soak in the magic of this wonderful city. And as I sat down, all these little kids ran up to me, and they tried to sell me things. They were trying to sell me postcards or chiclets. And having grown up in Latin America, I immediately connected with these little kids. And I started joking around with them a little bit. And after a while, they all ran off, but there was one little boy who sat next to me on his shoe shining kit. And he kept insisting to shine my shoes. And it took me a while to convince him that it actually is not possible to shine tennis shoes. But he was the cutest little boy. And after a while, I realized maybe he was sitting next to me still because he was hungry. So I offered him the rest of my food. And it was shocking to me to see how he ate it. I'd never seen somebody eat like that before. And it became clear to me that he was hungry. And so that night, as I had dinner, I decided I was going to save some of my food and go look for this little boy again. And it was always easy to spot. He had the same clothes on every day, and he had a hole in the butt of his pants with no underwear on. And so he was always easy to spot from a distance. And but that night I went in and I found Edgar in the main plaza again. And when I brought this food to him, he immediately took it and ran back and started sharing it with his friends, which was so touching to me. And so that night I just made a commitment that I was gonna try to find Edgar every day. And it became the highlight of my day every day, finding Edgar. My last night in Cusco, as I was walking back to my apartment where I was living, I ended up stumbling upon Edgar sleeping in the street. It was close to midnight. It was cold. You could see your breath in the air. And he had his sweater pulled over his knees, trying to stay warm. And when I found him, I woke him up, and when he saw me, I could see he'd been crying. You could see these tear stains on his dark cheeks. And he immediately smiled when he saw me, and he kind of rubbed his eyes with his sweater. And I asked him, I was like, Edgar, why are you sleeping in the streets? I knew that he had a family. He'd talked to me about his parents before. And he said that someone had stolen his shoe shining kit, and he was too afraid to go home. He said he knew his dad was going to beat him if he came home because his dad was an alcoholic. And he was the one that was responsible for helping feed his family as a 9-year-old. And so I ended up giving him the little bit of cash that I had. I didn't have much. And that night I could hardly sleep, worried about this little boy. And the next day I got on a bus to leave Cusco for the last time. And as I got on the bus and it stopped in the main plaza to pick some people up, I looked out the window and I saw Edgar. And he saw me. And we had just enough time where I slid open the window of this bus and he ran next to the bus waving goodbye to me, and he had bought a big bag of candy that he was now selling in the streets. And on that bus, I made a commitment. I decided that I was going to use my life to try to find a way to help kids like Edgar. He truly inspired me, and he allowed me to really kind of learn to look beyond myself. And so from that moment on, I knew that I needed to find a way to make a difference. And I decided that when I was in school, I found and discovered a passion that I had for entrepreneurship. And I realized that through entrepreneurship, I could hopefully have an impact somehow in the world. And so I ended up deciding that I could start a business. And so I started my first business, and I actually tried a couple different businesses first that I tried to attach a social mission to the brand or to the business. But those businesses didn't work. They failed pretty quickly. And so I decided, I'm just going to learn how to go start a business in general. So I started my first business, did that for about 6 years, and then I was lucky the business did well. I sold the business, and I ended up going to graduate school for a couple of years where I studied, I got an MBA, and then I decided to go pursue another business. I moved down to Brazil and started a business there. And in a lot of ways, it was a dream come true. I was back in Latin America where I'd grown up. My 2 daughters were speaking Portuguese and going to an international school, much like I had as a child. And we grew this amazing business. It became Brazil's Startup of the Year in 2012. In our first 18 months of launch, we went from 4 employees to 300 employees. And it was everything I'd ever hoped for in some ways. But at the same time, I knew I needed to leave. And my partner and my investors didn't understand, but it came back to my experience that I'd had with Edgar. I knew that I had a responsibility to find a way to have an impact. So after 10 years as an entrepreneur, I resigned as CEO of the company I'd started, and I moved back to the United States with the idea of building a business that could make an impact somehow in the world. And so I incorporated the business as a benefit corporation, a new type of entity where you actually make a legal commitment to do good. And when I first came back to the US, I talked to an attorney that I'd used for years with my businesses and told him I wanted to incorporate a business that was a benefit corporation. That built into our mission, we had this idea of giving back and doing good. And he advised me to not do it. He said, do not incorporate as a benefit corporation. He's like, first just start the business, make sure it works, and then 4 or 5 years down the road, you can convert to a benefit corporation. That's what everyone else had done. And he just said, investors are not going to be interested in investing in a business that starts as a benefit corporation that's giving away money before it's even made money. But I felt passionate about this. I felt like this was something that I felt was important. I believe that if businesses could make a difference in the world, we could solve some of these big issues that we're seeing. We can eradicate poverty. We could solve a lot of the crises by creating a sustainable way of giving back. And so I incorporated as a benefit corporation, and then I went to Silicon Valley and tried to convince investors to invest in this business. And it's shocking because it turns out that venture capitalists actually have hearts. I didn't know this was actually true, but it's true. And we got investors to invest in this business, and we were able to launch it. And we just had our 3-year anniversary yesterday, or last week. So it's been a really fun and wild ride to build this business. And I'm going to tell you a little bit more about it, but the idea behind this business was that I really believe that, and we instilled these core values of the brand from the very beginning. I flew in from Brazil. I rounded up 5 friends of mine, 5 people that I believed I needed to go build this brand. They were award-winning product and gear designers, other amazing entrepreneurs and adventurers, and we basically sat down. I flew in from Brazil. They flew in from all around the country. We met in a cabin in Utah. And we discussed our core values. We discussed what this brand needed to represent, what it needed to stand for. And the reason we did that from day one, before we even talked about product, before we talked about our go-to-market strategy, is because I believe that if you have strong core values from inception, that it ends up driving outcomes. So your core values end up shaping the culture of your organization. The culture ends up shaping and determining your behaviors, and then ultimately those behaviors determine your outcomes. And so that ended up being like a really critical piece to how we wanted to build this brand. And we believe that the business had a responsibility to use our profits to support poverty alleviation, but we also believe that we could have an impact in other ways by inspiring people to do good. We, very early on, we identified the Nothing But Nets organization is something that we believed in. I really believe that we could make a strong impact by working on causes that saved lives. And it was shocking to me to learn how little money it took to go impact and save lives. For $10, you could literally buy a mosquito net and train people on how to use these and save lives. With such, we could sell a few backpacks or sell a tent and be able to go fund something like this. And so it was tremendously impactful and inspiring for our team to be able to see that we could make an impact like this. So we ended up deciding to launch this brand, and we decided to do this in a little bit different way. The outdoor industry is very saturated. There's a lot of different outdoor brands. But we knew we had to build this brand in a way that had never been done before. And so we started with an event. We decided that if we could have people go live the core values of this brand, we could truly go make a difference. And so I want to share a couple of quick videos here that will kind of share a little bit about our story of how we got started and then how we launched this brand.
A small team of experienced travelers, entrepreneurs, and designers gathered in a cabin in the mountains of Utah. Their goal? Shake up the outdoor industry with a better way of doing business. Less this, more this. And with a better way to help those in need. Less this, more this. In other words, build an outdoor brand for the bold and thoughtful, like you. A business that helps alleviate poverty, moves people to do good, and inspires adventure.
So we decided to make amazing gear that could help make an impact on the world. Gear for good.
And so, Cotopaxi was born. A benefit corporation named after a volcano in Ecuador and represented by the noble llama, the camelid with a heart of gold.
And we used our experience to design and sell product that would help people around the world.
They worked out of a living room.
This living room.
We partnered with factories in the US and abroad and collaborated with sewers in the Philippines to create one-of-a-kind backpacks sourced with remnant fabric.
They developed relationships with farmers in Bolivia to source insulation made from llama fiber, leading to the most funded sweater in Kickstarter history, and worked to ensure their designs came to life under fair, sustainable working conditions for everyone involved. The team grew as they connected with like-minded people who shared their mission of giving. They created Questable, the 24-hour adventure race to promote travel, encourage adventure, and inspire people to volunteer in their communities.
We even adopted 2 llamas.
It was the beginning of something special, a brand that was growing into a collective force for good. Gear for good. The 3 powerful words that remain at the heart of our company today. The 2-part promise that says your gear will last and have a positive impact on the world. This is Cotopaxi, and we make gear for good.
So that's kind of the brand story, and a few things that I want to talk about on there is kind of the way that we think about having impact. So of course, using a percentage of our profits to support poverty alleviation, but we found that through business we could actually have a more holistic approach to tackling poverty, and that was by also using our purchasing power to go impact lives. So I shared a couple examples. One is our most popular backpack. It's a backpack where we use leftover materials, remnant materials from the manufacturing process. These are materials that would have gone to waste, and we found a way to use those. And not only use them, but we did it in a unique way where we actually went to the sewers. The sewers are actually, they've been there on average for 11 and a half years in this factory, and they're amazing craftsmen and artisans, but they've never had a voice in the creative process. They were never given the freedom to actually make choices themselves. They were simply told what to sew and how to sew it, and that's what they had to do. And so we went to them and said, hey, we want to give you guys creative control. You can choose any materials you want, any colors that you want. There's only one rule, which is to make no bag alike. And so these bags are funky. Like, they're all different colors, the straps are different colors, but they're beautiful, and people love them because they have a story behind them. They have the story of empowerment, of giving a voice to the unsung heroes of the outdoor industry, the people that actually make our gear. And at the same time, using materials that would have polluted the environment, and then having a product that's unique to you. You're the only person on the planet with that specific product. So that's been a really cool story. The second story that we kind of highlighted briefly was the story of working with these Bolivian farmers. that ranch llamas. And so this is a place that I used to live. People in Bolivia and these communities make about $200 a year. So they live in extreme poverty. And this year we're ordering 500,000 pounds of llama wool from these communities. So having a tremendous impact on these communities in Bolivia through our business. And so the next video is going to talk a little bit more about the Questival, which was highlighted briefly as well. When we launched the brand, we knew we had to do this in a unique way. And I knew we had something special. We literally, to tell people about the event, we got our 2 llamas that you guys saw, Coto and Paxi. And we took Coto and Paxi, and we brought them to college campuses. And we got them off Craigslist, these llamas. And we brought them to college campuses, and people were like freaking out. Like we literally would have like hundreds of people gathered around taking selfies with these llamas saying, why are you guys here? And we tell them about this Questival and about this new brand. And we didn't actually ask for permission to show up on these campuses with llamas. So at one of the campuses, I remember like campus security rolled up in this golf cart, and I was thinking, oh man, we're in trouble. And the campus security got out of the golf cart, came up, took some selfies with the llamas, and then walked off. And it was like, oh my gosh, you can break any law as long as you have a llama with you. It was amazing. So, and then we went to this event. Like the very first day when people were checking in, I realized like the magic behind this event when I saw this huge line. It was like 2 blocks long of people waiting to check in. And people were wearing Cotopaxi shirts and hats, except that we hadn't even sold anything yet. They literally had made their own homemade gear, their own homemade Cotopaxi stuff. There was a Jeep that had our llama logo spray painted on its doors and on the hood of the Jeep and on the back of the Jeep. It's like, I wouldn't even do that to my own car. Like, this is crazy what people are doing. So here's a quick video that kind of tells a little bit more about the Questival event. So at every one of these events, we'll have thousands of millennials that show up and looking to make a difference in the world, looking to go out and build experiences and memories with their friends. And so this year we're doing 60 Questivals across the US and Canada. So we'll have around 150,000 people participate in one of these events. And they're out giving back to their communities, experiencing the outdoors. At every event, we have between $1,000 and $3,000 donated to Nothing But Nets, and also to the refugee crisis as well. And so this is something where we can have tremendous impact. And as a business, it doesn't cost us anything to ask. All we do is we ask our loyal brand evangelists to go out and do good with us. And this is the power of business, where you can actually have tremendous impact, not just in giving away money, but by inspiring people. One of the most impactful experiences I've had in the last few years has been working with refugees. I've developed a really special relationship with some refugees in my local community in Salt Lake City, and have also had some amazing experiences working with refugees abroad. My wife and I spent a recent wedding anniversary working with refugees as they were fleeing Syria. It was a truly heartbreaking experience for us. And we felt like we were able to make maybe a small impact in the way that they felt as they arrived and as we greeted them. And recently, on my role as on the Global Entrepreneurs Council here with the United Nations Foundation, we went on a trip to Jordan, and we met with Syrian refugees on the Syrian border in a refugee camp called Zatari. And it was just a truly eye-opening experience. It was heartbreaking. It was also inspiring. There were 1,500 small businesses that had been built in this refugee camp. There was a street that they called the Champs-Élysées, and it was they had all these businesses, women, sewing dresses, men making furniture out of these scrap pieces of wood, little restaurants, and it was truly a testament of the unconquerable human spirit. One of my favorite moments was actually at the end, where we were kind of on this little hill overlooking the refugee camp, and there were all these little kids that kind of gathered around us to see what we were doing, what we were about. Obviously, we didn't fit in, especially me, super, tall and very white and bald. I definitely stand out, and so, one of my favorite moments was, talking to the kids, and there was a little boy that grabbed my hands and instinctively just started walking up my legs and up my body, and he took off his shoes, which I thought was so considerate. And he took off his shoes and he walked up and then did a little flip down. And I do this with my own daughters, and probably many of you have done it with your own parents or maybe with your own kids. And pretty soon the little kids lined up to do this, and every single one of them was taking off their shoes, and pretty soon I had these dusty footprints all the way up my pants and my shirt. And and for that small moment, we forgot that we were in a refugee camp. And it was so touching to me, when I think of my own children, my two daughters that aren't too dissimilar from these kids. It was something that really stuck with me. And that night, as we got back to our hotel in Amman, in the capital city, I went into my hotel room and I turned on the TV, and I saw an image that many of us saw around the world. A picture of a little boy named Amran, who was in Aleppo, and his family was bombed. His brother was killed in the bombing, and as he was pulled out of the rubble, they put him in the back of this ambulance, and he reached up, if you remember the video, reached up and touched his face and found blood, and then wiped the blood onto the seat of the ambulance. And as I saw this image, it completely broke me inside. These same children that we played with earlier that day had gone through these kind of experiences. And it really hit home for me the urgency of the work that we have to do. Everyone in this room, we're fortunate. We have opportunities that many don't have. And it's our responsibility to find a way to give back, find a way to make a difference in some way. Many of you may have wondered whatever happened to Edgar, that little 9-year-old boy that I met in Peru. I've wondered the same thing. I've thought about him every single day since I met him in 2001. I was so inspired by him, and I've always just wondered, did he have a chance to go to school? What became of his life? And about 2 years ago, I decided that I needed to go try to find out. And so I flew back to Peru for the first time, and I got into Cusco, and I immediately went into the main plaza, and I had this picture of him sitting on his shoe shining kit. And I started showing it on my phone, and pretty soon this crowd of people, about 60 people, started gathering around, wondering why the tall, bald gringo was speaking Spanish. And pretty soon there was a kid in the back of this crowd, and he said, "I know who that is. That's my best friend. His name's Edgar. And we grew up selling things on the streets, shiny shoes and selling candy." And this young man had a portfolio of art in his arms, and he said, "We now sell paintings in the streets." And he started saying, "I know his phone number," and he started saying his phone number out loud in front of this whole group. I thought, wow, this guy is either a very good liar or he knows Edgar, and he knew his name. This is amazing. So we walked over to a payphone, and I put some coins in, and he dialed the number, and someone answered the phone. I said, "Is this Edgar?" And he said, "Yes." And I said, "There's no way you'll remember who I am, but you might remember a night when you were 9 years old when somebody stole your shoe shining kit. And it was silent for a second, and he said, are you the one that gave me money to help me buy a new kit? And it was just, I was just completely overwhelmed with emotion. And we ended up meeting up, and we spent a day together, embracing and sharing. He took me up into the hills where his little home was, and he told me his life story. His father had died of alcohol abuse. His mother died giving birth to his younger brother. And so he was orphaned when he was a young teenager. And he's now raising his younger sister and younger brother. And we got to his home. It was a home made of mud and a hole in the ground for a toilet. And there was a piece of me that was so discouraged to see how he was living. But another piece of me that was so proud of him because he was so proud of himself. And he's now going through a 3-year program. He's 2 years into it, where he's learning to be a tour guide. And I'm helping pay for the program as long as he gets good grades. So he always sends me pictures of his report card, and he does really well most of the time. And you know, we're in touch almost every single day. He's one of the most active Facebook users on the planet. And so we're in touch frequently, and I'm just, honestly, I'm so grateful for my relationship with him. He's truly changed my life, and he gave me more than I ever could have given him. And so my question for each of you is, who is your Edgar? Who is the person that you can look to every day, the person that can inspire you to look beyond yourselves, to look for a way that you can have an impact in the world? Thank you.